Self-importance is another thing that must be dropped, just like personal history, he said in a dramatic tone. I certainly didn't want to argue with him. It was obvious that I was at a terrible disadvantage. He wasn't going to walk back to his house until he was ready, and I didn't know the way. I had to stay with him. He made a strange and sudden movement. He sort of sniffed the air around him. His head shook slightly and rhythmically. He seemed to be in a state of unusual alertness. He turned and stared at me with a look of bewilderment and curiosity. His eyes swept up and down my body as if he were looking for something specific. Then he stood up abruptly and began to walk fast. He was almost running. I followed him. He kept a very accelerated pace for nearly an hour. Finally, he stopped by a rocky hill, and we sat in the shade of a bush. The trotting had exhausted me completely, although my mood was better. It was strange, the way I had changed. I felt almost elated. But when we had started to trot after our argument, I was furious with him. "This is very weird," I said, "but I feel really good." I heard the cawing of a crow in the distance. He lifted his finger to his right ear and smiled. "That was an omen," he said. A small rock tumbled downhill and made a crashing sound when it landed in the chaparral. He laughed out loud and pointed his finger to the direction of the sound. "And that was an agreement," he said. He then asked me if I was ready to talk about my self-importance. I laughed. My feeling of anger seemed so far away that I couldn't even conceive how I'd become so cross with him. "I can't understand what's happening to me," I said. "I got angry, and now I don't know why I'm not angry anymore." "The world around us is very mysterious," he said. "It doesn't yield its secrets easily." I liked his cryptic statements. They were challenging and mysterious. I couldn't determine whether they were filled with hidden meanings or whether they were just plain nonsense. "If you ever come back to the desert here," he said, "stay away from that rocky hill where we stopped today. Avoid it like the plague." "Why, what's the matter?" "This isn't the time to explain it," he said. "Now, we are concerned with losing self-importance. As long as you feel that you're the most important thing in the world, you can't really appreciate the world around you. You're like a horse with blinders. All you see is yourself, apart from everything else." He examined me for a moment. "I'm going to talk to my little friend here," he said, pointing to a small plant. He kneeled in front of it and began to caress it and to talk to it. I didn't understand what he was saying at first, but then he switched languages and talked to the plant in Spanish. He babbled inanities for a while. Then he stood up. "It doesn't matter what you say to a plant," he said. "You can just as well make up words. What's important is the feeling of liking it and treating it as an equal." He explained that a man who gathers plants must apologize every time for taking them and must assure them that someday his own body will serve as food for them. "So, all in all, the plants and ourselves are even," he said. "Neither we nor they are more or less important." "Come on, talk to the little plant," he urged me. "Tell it that you don't feel important anymore." I went as far as kneeling in front of the plant, but I couldn't bring myself to speak to it. I felt ridiculous and laughed. I wasn't angry, however.